spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of sport, the thrill of victory, and the agony of defeat.
There are many ways to start a YouTube video essay, and this is probably going to be the worst, but I feel like I should preface the whole idea behind this video in a way that completely undermines the concept. Neither the NHL nor any major North American sports league is ever going to adopt a promotion and relegation system. Oh boy, that is going to do wonders for my audience retention. North American sports has simply never worked in these formats for a myriad of reasons I will touch on later. But ultimately, culturally, the structural makeup of North American sports and the businesses that drive these organizations would simply never permit it. Sport in North America isn't made up of independent clubs, it's made up of franchises bankrolled by billionaires. That doesn't mean this can't be a fun, if futile, thought experiment to while away between 15 to 20 minutes of your time. It seems inevitable the NHL will continue to expand. We currently have 32 franchises with talk of Atlanta and an eventual return to Phoenix. And as the NHL continues to expand, the chances of seeing your team win anything within your lifetime steadily decreases. After all, there can only be one Stanley Cup champion. So I thought I would talk about how the NHL could implement a promotion and relegation system.
I said could, Gary.
And why I think that would actually make the league more exciting. First, however, I need to dispel the common misconceptions North Americans have regarding promotion and relegation systems in Europe, and well, soccer globally, as well as some European hockey leagues such as the Swedish Hockey League. It feels like as North American sports fans become more exposed to European soccer, they are in some small way warming to, or at the very least becoming intrigued by the notion of promotion and relegation, and the kind of jeopardy it represents throughout the season for teams in peril. There are few dead rubber games in European sports leagues that implement promotion and relegation, while in the NHL, does anyone really want to watch Ottawa and Columbus in March see who can tank harder for a better chance in the draft lottery? However, one thing I often see is, and I by no means tar every North American with this brush, but one thing I often see in Reddit is a sentiment like, oh, that would be cool, like if an AHL team could be promoted to the NHL. And no, that's not how European sports teams work, with the exception of some soccer leagues such as in Spain and Portugal where B teams are part of their pyramid and are also not allowed to play at the same level as their parent club. Teams in the lower rungs of European sports are independent, autonomous entities. So let's take Ipswich Town for example. Ipswich Town were reformed in 1878 and have always existed, regardless of level, as a club representing the town of Ipswich with its own staff, its own players, and its own organisational structure. The players who play for Ipswich Town are not developmental players for a Premier League team, they are, by and large, Ipswich Town's players. Some have even come through Ipswich Town's own youth academy. Ipswich are not a farm team of, say, Aston Villa, basically blooding Aston Villa's players and prospects in the Championship until they're ready for the Premier League. That's just not how European leagues are structured outside the examples of Real Madrid B, for instance. Ipswich Town are a club with a long and rich history. They even won the UEFA Cup in 1981. Their past includes European victories over the likes of Real Madrid, Inter Milan and Barcelona. That's not to say smaller clubs in European leagues do not have strategic partnerships with larger clubs. This usually comes with the loaning of the bigger club's youth players to the smaller club and benefits such as agreed exhibition games pre-season. This doesn't amount to the same thing as being a farm team. The smaller club still operates as an independent entity. This may eventually change in soccer as team ownership increasingly begins to conglomerate, but that's a video for someone like HITC Sevens to cover. The leagues themselves place roadblocks in allowing teams to become farm teams by placing restrictions on the number of loanees a team can field. In the case of the championship, a team can only use 5 loanees in a matchday squad, and while they can in theory loan more than 5 players, the club has to submit to the championship a 25-man squad list for set periods of the season. So filling up with loanees wouldn't be a clever idea. Firstly because, well, if your 25-man team was made up of 25 loanees, you'd only be able to field 5 players, and you'd lose. But also, more practically, bigger clubs loan youth players to play and develop and would be reluctant to loan to a team already overburdened with loanees. And these loanees don't just come from one club. Cardiff City, for instance, had players on loan from Nottingham Forest, Liverpool, West Brom, Manchester City, and even Spanish club Granada this last season. Meanwhile, Cardiff themselves had 16 of their own players out on development loans across Europe in Scotland, Belgium, Ireland, and the Netherlands, as well as the English lower divisions. By contrast, an AHL team is an affiliate of their NHL partnered team. They operate as a developmental wing of their NHL team. Their organisation and staff is often set by their NHL organisation with varying levels of limited autonomy. But crucially, the bulk of their roster is made up of developmental prospects, usually on 2-way contracts with their NHL team. By and large, AHL teams don't have histories that extend beyond the AHL. Nobody is going to regale you with stories of the night the Bridgeport Islanders defeated one of the most storied teams in NHL history. And the fact the Bridgeport AHL team is called the Islanders when Bridgeport is not an island gives you an idea how much an AHL team's every facet, right down to their identity, is dictated by their parent club. If we take the Hartford Wolfpack as an example, 25 of their 30 rostered players are contracted by the New York Rangers. AHL teams tend to pad out their rosters with aged-out NCAA and CHL players who have decided to continue to pursue their NHL dream instead of taking a lucrative contract in Europe. Those players not contracted by the parent club tend to pad out the lower half of the roster, and as a fan, it's quite hard to identify with a team that has so few of its own players. And once these players reach what the AHL deems veteran status, if they want to continue their careers, their only choice is to play in Europe, and many will simply retire when the AHL veteran rules age them out. All of this means you could not promote the Colorado Eagles into the NHL in lieu of, say, the San Jose Sharks. It would create a massive conflict of interest with the Colorado Avalanche. It would also mean the Avs could simply bounce players between the two organisations. It'd be a fucking mess. 2-way contracts would be a mess, waivers would be a mess, and also, the best AHL team is miles off the pace of the worst NHL team. Would you suddenly have the best San Jose Sharks signing for the Eagles? Structurally, it would be impossible because AHL teams or the farm league teams of any major North American sport are not congruent with lower division European sports clubs. So with that all cleared up, I do have a few ideas how the NHL could implement a promotion and relegation system that would make the NHL much more interesting.
What?
Interesting.
Now, to make this practical, this would be predicated on the NHL expanding to at least 36 teams, which right now is far from inconceivable. Let's say Atlanta, Phoenix, no, not you, Alex Morello, are joined by Houston and Kansas because Lord knows the Canadians will never allow Quebec City to have a team again. The NHL would have to remain a closed shop. The NHL would have total control over both divisions, and there would be no pyramid because, as I discussed, it is not structurally viable. As such, the minor leagues would continue to exist beneath the now divided NHL in their current state, and the team finishing bottom overall would not be relegated from the second tier, and would continue to get first overall draft pick. The draft as such remaining as a single entity encompassing all 36 teams in the same format as today. The league would be split into 2 divisions. Let's call the top division the Stanley Cup division, and the second tier, I don't know, the Contenders division, because North American sports love crap branding. Each division would have 18 teams, but only the teams in the Stanley Cup division would play for the Stanley Cup. As a European, I'm still not a big fan of the best teams in the season not winning the actual trophy after 82 games just for seeding purposes, and Lord, do I think the playoffs go on for far too long. But you can wait for my spicy take on the NHL season length at a later date. Assuming the NHL is wedded to 16 teams making the playoffs, and they are because money, the top 16 of 18 could play in the Stanley Cup playoffs, while the bottom 2 teams in the Stanley Cup division would enter a competition with the top 14 teams in the contenders division in what would amount to a promotion and relegation playoff final. So just as the semi-finals are wrapping up for the Stanley Cup, you would also be reaching the final stage to find out which 2 teams would be playing in the Stanley Cup division next season. You might have noticed I didn't call them the conference finals because, well, geography is one of but a myriad reasons this would be difficult to implement. For the purpose of the regular season, you could implement some kind of geographically weighted schedule, but for the purpose of the Stanley Cup playoffs and the promotion relegation playoffs, it would just be a straight 1v16 type seeding situation, with the 2 teams finishing bottom of the Stanley Cup division gaining the 1 and 2 seeding for the promotion relegation playoffs. Now, personally, I would rather have 1 to 16 in the NHL now, or at the very least a straight 1v8 conference structure over the divisional bullshit we have right now, and I don't think I'm in the minority with that take. So why do I think this would be more exciting? Firstly, it would eliminate tanking unless a team was very poor. The best team a San Jose would have faced this season would have been someone like Philadelphia. It's hard to imagine a situation where a team is so cast adrift they decided to tank out a season in the contenders division. It would also mean games in both divisions were closer, and going to the last week of the season, everyone would have something to play for. There would be a genuine sense of jeopardy for teams at the bottom of the Stanley Cup division. It would also lift teams from the purgatory of terminally middling seasons like Minnesota and Calgary by giving them some meaning, although they'd probably just become the NHL equivalent of what we would call a yo-yo team. So why won't this happen? Oh, for so many reasons. Firstly, revenue. In this personal fantasy, each team would play each other 4 times in the regular season, making for 68 total games. And again, this boils down to my belief the NHL should be wrapped up before TAPSAF weather. But a system that bifurcates the league would not necessarily be great for attendances, for cultural reasons I will touch on later. That's not to say teams doing badly in a single structure NHL gate well either. The San Jose Sharks gates are down almost 28% since 2014-15. Ironically, the first season they'd missed the playoffs in a decade, and the next year attendances instantly dropped despite going on to make the finals. A split in the league would also mean splits in rivalries. Right now, Toronto and Montreal would be in different divisions, for instance, and these are huge hockey cultural touchstones. Not that this doesn't happen in Europe. For a long time, Manchester United and Manchester City were at different levels. One solution would be if you shortened the NHL season and introduced a cup competition like the FA Cup where all 36 teams took part. Mathematically, a total bollocks, but you could do something geographically based, or maybe bring some of the top teams from Europe to pad out numbers to make it viable. In fact, while North Americans are generally disparaging of European hockey, I think a lot of fans would enjoy seeing new opponents, and the occasions NHL and European teams have faced off against each other, they've been generally well attended. But let's be honest, the chances of hockey fans getting as excited about a cross-continental cup competition are fairly slim long-term. And ultimately, while revenue concerns would be the biggest stumbling block from an NHL perspective, North American fandoms are the reason this could never work. From speaking to hockey fans across the Atlantic and European sports fans, one of the prevailing aspects I have experienced, and I know this is a trust me bro anecdote that isn't applicable to all NHL fans, so feel free to correct me down below in the comments. Lord knows I need the engagement. But one of the prevailing aspects of North American fandom is they don't really understand supporting a lesser team. Right now, there's an air of egalitarianism to the NHL. Every one of its franchises technically have the same chance of winning the Stanley Cup at the start of the season. Meanwhile, a team in the 5th tier of English football has at best a chance to get promoted to the 4th tier and maybe pull off an FA Cup giant killing. Yet Chesterfield in the 5th tier of English football averaged 7,893 fans a game last season, more fans than the average AHL game, more fans than AAA baseball. These are local clubs steeped in history, and a form of community has built up around them, which isn't as prevalent in franchise sports or even at the higher level of corporatized European sport. There are families that will have supported Chesterfield for generations, that will have lived and died through promotions, relegations, cup giant killings, and cup disappointments. And I don't think fans of major sports get that. Don't get me wrong, there will be families who have supported NHL teams for generations, but those teams have always been in the top tier, always an NHL team. Would they continue to support if their team got stuck in the contender division for 20 years, 30 years? I don't doubt some would. There's pain aplenty being small fry in major league sports. Mets and Browns fans know that well enough. But many would stop following when there was no hope of a Stanley Cup at the beginning of the season. But to be fair, Toronto Maple Leafs fans have stuck around this long. This mentality is even prevalent in European sport. Why support a Rochdale when you have the Manchester clubs just down the road? While North American teams tend to have plenty of geographical separation, North American sports audiences also have plenty of options for major sports. Outside of soccer in major English cities, your options are low-level professional and semi-professional sports with small followings. Working on a ladder rather than a pyramid principle, the AHL is analogous to the Championship being the second tier of the NHL, yet Championship teams average gates of almost 20,000, while the AHL averages 5,920. Part of that is because minor league teams are just wings of a larger organisation. How much can you attach yourself to a team filled with another team's prospects who will be gone in a few years maximum? My promotion relegation system wouldn't turn half the league into farm teams. They'd still retain their identity and autonomy, but they would have to earn their right to even be in the league that played for the Stanley Cup, and I can imagine that would turn a lot of fans off, especially when they're unable to watch Connor McDavid or Alexander Ovechkin or Connor Bedard in their building a few times a year because they're no longer in the same division. Even European teams that get relegated experience gate drops, and a two-tier system is fundamentally not egalitarian. It would punish teams for futility, which I think is a good thing. It drives improvement. It's exciting. It's also never going to happen. This has been a complete waste of time. So what do you think? Do you think a promotion relegation system in the NHL would make it more exciting, or do you think I'm insane and should never countenance it? I know one thing's for certain, the NHL certainly never will. If anything, the Super League debacle has demonstrated that billionaire owners of European soccer clubs from North America, Asia and Arabia would rather not have to worry about relegation, and European sport is more likely to turn towards the closed systems of North America than for North American major leagues to ever adopt relegation. Tell me down in the comments what you think and what you would like to see the NHL do to improve the current league structure. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and check out some of my other videos. My last one really took off in the algorithm out of nowhere and it really helps. And until next time, oh wait, what does that say? Insert something inspirational.